What's good, Tinfoil Gang? Welcome to the recap for the 8th episode of Season 2, and it's entitled The Book of Quinn. Now, the story moves forward in Episode 8 with a focus on Lucas Kyle, and he's taking full advantage of the powers that come with his new job title to zero in on the key to unlocking the hidden message. Now, I got the impression that the book Meadows kept was the answer, but it turns out there's a little bit more to this puzzle. So Juliet is still stuck in Silo 17 because the obstacles keep mounting in her quest to make it back to Silo 18. Solo is missing, and it seems like there are other people in the silo. Bernard continues his campaign to silence the voices of the people in the lowers who've been giving him a run for his money. But Bernie's got a new trick up his sleeve, and this all started when Walker turned on that camera in Episode 7. The saga continues. Before we begin, I've got to tell you this video is full of spoilers, so keep that in mind before you decide to continue. Quick shout out to the channel patrons, much love and appreciation for making all of this possible. And of course, big up to the newest members, Kelda and Daniel Roberts. Thank you so much for choosing to directly support the channel this way, and I hope seeing your name in lights puts a smile on your face. Alright guys, tinfoil tight as it's time to dive. So the last time we were with Juliet, she was finishing up her mission of resolving the flooded silo problem for Solo. That is until he suddenly disappeared. All signs point to an attack. Juliet tries to follow the tracks up the stairs. She runs into a little problem. Solo's warning about that condition referred to as the bends comes back to haunt her when she starts experiencing some serious pain. Her only option is to follow Dr. Solo's prescription and dive 20 feet to safety until her blood normalizes, all the while knowing that someone might have killed Solo and they could just as easily do the same to her. No pressure. Now let's head over to Silo 18. We catch Bernard slinking around the silo, which is hilarious because a man at 6'5" has no business trying to be stealthy. Regardless, he's clearly up to something, and as you might have guessed, it's related to Walker. So, a significant yet profound moment takes place in this episode when Shirley adds Cooper's name to the massive wall of remembrance at the base of the silo. Cooper's name joins a long line of those who have sacrificed everything in the fight for freedom, and it certainly won't be the last name added. It's a powerful moment that speaks volumes without a single word. So back over to Juliet once more, and it turns out that Solo was right. That saves Juliet's life. After some time in the water, she's able to surface again and continue the search for Solo. No sign of Solo anywhere, but it becomes pretty obvious that something's off here. There's somebody else out there. A few moments later, and an armored figure pops out under a blinding spotlight demanding that she leave or be dealt with. Juliet just wants her fire suit and to check on Solo, in that order. So she'd prefer to try and talk this one out, but this dude is not having it. She tries pleading with him, but the response is an arrow to the shoulder. This was enough to send Juliet packing. She's at a major disadvantage against at least 2 opponents, and she's also injured now, so she runs off to take care of her wounds. So Shirley pops up again in the next scene, this time with Billings in the cafeteria. Now she's determined to get Billings on board. She's trying to convince him that his plan to hold Bernard and Sims accountable using the pact, she thinks it's flawed. The pact, she argues, is merely a tool that could never be effectively used against those who created it. Billings, however, remains unconvinced. In fact, he's almost offended at the idea because he, at this point in his life, is still a believer. That said, you can see echoes of Holston in this character as he's facing a very similar internal conflict. Billings stands by the law and he tries to always remain objective, but is he being too naive? He's gonna have to make up his mind at some point because there may not always be a fence to sit on. Lucas is in the hunt for that book that he believes is the key to the cipher that will unlock the message Salvador Quinn encrypted on that hard drive. It turns out that the answer is not the copy of The Wizard of Oz that Bernard had given to him. So his first move is to search Judge Meadows' old apartment to look for any books that might fit the criteria. Now he's only been Bernard's shadow for a minute, and he lacks the intimidation factor of a Mr. Sims, so he's getting resistance from judicial goons at first. Flashing that badge is enough to change their tune. The takeaway here is that these goons are here on orders from Sims to pack up the apartment and haul it off to judicial. Sims is aware that Bernard is looking for something important, and this is his best bet at finding out what that is. Now Lucas goes through every book he finds on the premises, and he comes up with nothing. Meadows is connected, but the answer isn't in any of the relics Lucas finds here. So he gets the idea to look up the relatives of Salvador Quinn to see if he can get any leads from them, and he comes up with the name Terrence Penbrook. So he's got a new lead, Yahtzee. Alright, back down to the lowers. We're at Walker's shop and they're discussing plans on making a supply run into enemy territory. They're low on resources and things are getting desperate, so it seems like the obvious solution. Walker has a different idea though. She says let's rescue Carla and she'll get them the supplies. She's not successful in convincing them and you can't really blame them. It would be almost impossible to pull something like this off. But she's worried about Carla, so her frustration is coming from the fact that nobody seems to be able to do anything about that. After kicking everyone out of the workshop, she's surprised to see a message pop up on her computer. We're going to come back to this in a minute. So in the next scene, Sims and Amundsen are meeting in private. Sims is pissed about the fact that Lucas Kyle blew up his plans to get a hold of the contents of Meadows' apartment, and he wants Amundsen to give up the information on the investigation. Amundsen is like, I don't know, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Sims tries to press him, reminding him that he's obligated to follow his orders as head of judicial, but Amundsen reminds him that this dynamic only works on paper, just like it did when Bobby was the head of security. Can't really argue with that one. So let's go back over to Walker and the lowers. That message was for a service call on a pump. And we can assume that she knows that this sudden request that came out of the blue is related to her turning on that camera in the shop. This is a response from them. Despite knowing this, she's determined to head out to the job to see that Carla is good. If you guessed that the job is in the same room that Bernard was slithering around in earlier, then you would be correct. So back over to Lucas again, and he's looking for this Terrence Pembroke person, which leads him to the address of a family that isn't too interested in answering any of his questions. This household contains the descendants of Salvador Quinn, and they raise sheep to produce wool. You would think that the relatives of the former head of IT would be living the lavish lifestyle of the silo elite. But the name Salvador Quinn carries a stigma since the official record frames him as one of the bad guys. Their job as wool makers for cleaning appears to be part of that punishment. We learned earlier in the episode that according to Bernard, Salvador Quinn was actually a hero in the eyes of silo leadership because he was the one who implemented the plan that led to a 140-year span without a rebellion. Prior to that time, rebellions happened about once every 20 years. The concept was simple. Erase the past, erase the memories of the previous rebellions and the before times with the help of some memory-erasing drugs. Bernard seems to be confirming the existence of the drugs here, so the theory that the water is spiked is looking really good right now. Bernard also revealed that the library of items and the servers of the before times still exist. It's just that it's been kept away from the citizens so as not to stir up any of their curiosities. Later, one of the family members tries to hash things out with Lucas, and they're able to work out a deal. The family tells Lucas that Meadows came around looking for a book, and she must have assumed that they had it for the same reasons that Lucas did. According to the family, she exchanged some relics for it. That book was Salvador's personal copy of the pact. Remember how Simmons tried to get Amundsen to give him some inside information on Lucas's investigation? Well, Camille is here for round 2. She just happens to run into Amundsen in the next scene. Camille uses their past as an angle to get him to come over to her side of the argument at first, but then she presses harder by pointing out the precarious situation the silo is in and the importance of making the right decisions right now. What she's doing here is she's questioning where Amundsen's loyalties lie. Is it with Bernard or is it with the silo? We will get an answer to this later on in this episode. So Walker makes her way over to this super suspicious service call, and wouldn't you know it, it's not a real service call at all. It's actually Bernard, and he wants to have a little chat, or should I say, make a deal. Now that Bernard knows about her feelings for Carla, he plans to use this against her and the people in Mechanical for making his job so hard. In exchange for info on Mechanical's next move, Bernard will allow her to see Carla and confirm that she is alive and well. Walker has a tough decision to make here. Is she gonna snitch on them for Carla's sake and risk the life of the others? Can she live with the other option? Well, we do find out because Mechanical sends out their supply run team, and to their surprise, they're met by judicial goons who clearly had a heads up. Walker's wish is technically granted. He only gets to see Carla for a few seconds to confirm things, but nothing more. Bernard intends to keep this arrangement going while he keeps her on the hook. He even adds a few more stipulations to the deal, like the camera has to stay on, and she has to keep feeding him info, or else. He does claim that he will let them be together after this is all said and done, so the chance that he actually means it well, slim at best. Let's head over to Judicial, where Sims is putting in some late hours when he suddenly gets a somewhat coded message from Amundsen to meet up at the apple orchard. Sims arrives to find Amundsen at the spot, and he drops everything he knows on the Lucas Kyle situation in the search for the mysterious book. Now, Robert is grateful, but Amundsen tells him that this is the last favor he'll do for him. Paul and Kathleen Billings share a tense moment when she confronts him about the secret page from the relics he's been hiding. She learns about this through a conversation with Patrick's big mouth during a medical check. Now, Paul tries to justify his actions, claiming that he kept it from her for her own safety, believing it to be too dangerous. But Kathleen isn't mad about the danger. She's mad about the fact that he kept something so significant from her in the first place. There's definitely a running theme here in the story about trust. Paul ends up showing her the image, and they're both brought to tears thinking about how much was lost and the pain of not knowing why. Okay, so we're finally back over at Silo 17. Juliet has found her way to a safe spot to recover from the arrow wound. She's channeling her inner Bruce Willis while patching herself up in some dark corner of the silo. She still has business to attend. She has to see about Solo, but they don't want to talk, so she's in quite the predicament. So back over to Lucas in Silo 18. And he's narrowed it down to Salvador's copy of the pact. So the next challenge is figuring out which page to use, which doesn't come easy, but he eventually figures that out too. And then the first line of the message is decoded. What it says will give you goosebumps. First line of the message reads, "If you've gotten this far, you already know the game is rigged." Not exactly an uplifting message. You know things are bad when the big boss is saying that the game is rigged. Now, the game he is referring to could mean the silo itself, but I'm going to take this an entire rack of tinfoil further. This may be a wild speculation, but the first line might be saying that the entire setup is a controlled experiment or a prison of some kind. Why do I say that? Well, this makes me think back to Meadows and her seeming depression. It makes you wonder if she knew the true nature of the silo and that's why she was so ready to be sent out to clean. Did she give up because she knew the truth and wanted one last look at the real world before she left? These questions weigh on my mind. On his way out of the apartment, Lucas runs into Sims, who wants to know what's really going on, but Lucas is able to get away without revealing the truth. The key thing to remember from this scene is that Sims warns Lucas that Bernard is a duplicitous snake that cannot be trusted. He will use you and throw you away the minute he can, so don't get comfortable. I'm paraphrasing. It looks like Sims is setting the table for a future collaboration should the opportunity arise, but we'll have to wait and see. Walker's final scene of the episode takes place right after Mechanical's supply run got jammed up, and you can always tell a Silo character is stressed out when you see them drinking. So Shirley enters the scene to deliver the news about the botched plan, and Walker has to pretend she knows nothing about it. Now, Teddy and a bunch of Mechanicals have been taken off the board, and Walker's gotta live with that. Shirley starts speculating that there's a snitch among them. Yoinks. No, but for real, this has to be eating her up inside, and I don't know how this is gonna pan out for her. But hey, at least Bernard is amused. Juliet is back out of the water, and she prepared for the scuffle this time by adding a shield to go with that axe. She runs into her friends again, but this time she's able to take advantage of the situation. New gear, new attitude. Juliet manages to get the upper hand on the armored guy, but not so much for the other two. But you can tell that this group of attackers seems really young, so that's a plus. Hopefully she can reason her way out of this one. Alright, so my assessment. The scenes with the greater emotional weight carried this episode, and the pacing and editing has been on par with the rest of the season so far, so I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. I really want to see more progress on the Juliet side of the story, but I'm beginning to think that maybe that can't be helped because things have to synchronize. So I've got a few questions, and for me it has everything to do with the closing. Why do you think these people were immediately hostile towards her? Is it because she's been seen with Solo? Maybe they have beef with him and she's just guilty by association. Also, why hasn't Solo mentioned them before? They claim to have killed Solo. For some reason I don't buy it. I think they just wanted to scare her off. Anyway, thanks for watching, especially if you made it this far. You're a star. Big up to the Tinfoil fam and the patrons for holding it down. 2 more episodes to go. Be safe out there, Tinfoilers. Be kind to yourself, and until next time, off you go.